Okay, so here I am with Angel Robinson. Angel Robinson is a longtime member of the Anarchopulco event team. Do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself, Angel?
That's a question. Where to begin? My name is Angel. I am the founder, actually, of Solarpunk Summit, which is my own festival. I've been on the Anarchopulco team for 3 years in different capacities, co-producing the Free Your Family Camp in 2019, and just participating generally in organizing the volunteers. This year, I am a sovereign human being doing my best to create a better world for myself and then those around me.
Excellent. Okay, so I wanted to interview you because I'm here sort of investigating the world of I don't know what to call it, right-wing anarchism or anarcho-capitalism. There seems to be more diversity within the milieu of Anarchopulco than I had imagined before coming here. So I was wondering if you could kind of speak a bit about the type of people that come to Anarchopulco and what their ideology or ideologies are.
Okay, I think you're coming at a really good time, just because so many things are shifting in the world, and so that's also shifting the core of what the Anarchopulco community is. And that's why you're seeing so much different. It's people who are seeking answers, not necessarily on the right, but just seeking a new perspective that allows them, in the face of everything that's happening, allows them to feel a bit freer. And so even when there is an alignment on every single aspect of economics or lifestyle choices, people are still being drawn into this particular container because at the root of it is a desire for a sovereign life, a more beautiful world, and connection with the community. So you find a lot here. But I think Anarchopulco has in the past been a it's been centered around the idea of freedom of exchange.
Okay, so freedom of exchange, Anarchopulco. If you go to the website, it's the event in the world for anarcho-capitalism. So you have studied economics. Is that correct? You want to? What exactly is your background in economics?
Okay, so I don't have a background in economics. Back in 2007, 2008, I don't even know anymore, when I started to wake up to just what the government is, to have a real awareness of how this thing operates, or the people within government operate, I started to shift into thinking about how the world actually works. And so I had this idea that we just really need to help poor people, but I didn't, and in my mind, helping poor people meant at that time giving poor people money. Poor people, that's even a weird phrase, but giving people without resources, that seemed to be the answer, an obvious answer, and that's the answer that a lot of people are, presenting, and so I sort of defaulted into that obvious answer. And then, but the more I studied certain ideas, the more I realized that it's not really about that. If you really want to help people, you have to think really deeply about the ways the system works. And I had no clue of that, and it spurred me into this rabbit hole, if you will, of economic theory and then philosophy as well, and many other things. And so for the 10 years after that, I spent a lot of time reading a lot of economic philosophy and economic theory to really have a sense of understanding, right? If you are going to take a position on something and also advocate that for others, certainly taking the time to actually have a sense of understanding seems like the right thing to do. And so for many, many years since then, I've just been
So which economists and philosophers and theorists have been most influential? Yeah.
Definitely like Murray Rothbard and Hayek. Mises, so the Austrian school. And the reason I love the Austrian school is that it's about human action. It's acknowledging like the inherent humanness of people, and that we're all making these economic decisions. Everything is an economic decision. We're deciding how to spend our time, and that in a lot of economic theory, it treats people as numbers to manipulate, whereas human action really gets at the root of like the individual acting based on their own preferences, based on their own lens, their experience of the world, and how that it's you can't control that because you can't account for it because it's ever changing, it's kaleidoscopic, and so really you just try to get at some sense of how things work rather than claiming absolute knowledge about how to get to certain places, right? And you look at the totality of things. Anyway, so that's why it really resonated with me is
Okay. Yeah, I mean, this is something that I've been thinking about more lately because it's become apparent to me that the left, which is where I've come out of, is doesn't have a solid economic analysis. They want the government to do everything, and I don't want the government to exist. So there's a pretty clear contradiction between my perspective and the perspective of a lot of leftists. So are you? I kind of take it that you coming out of like a social justice background when you talk about wanting to, alleviate the suffering of poor people, for instance.
a social ju- like was I a social justice activist? I'm just a person like most people who want to see good in the world, right? And I think that's everybody. And even like when you talk about people from the left who want to use government, like at the root of what they want is a better world, and they're trying to figure out how to get there. And I totally understand that. It's the most beautiful intention. But I do think that sometimes what we ignore, and I see a lot of people do this, is that if you justify the use of violent action against anyone in order to enforce any of the things that you want to accomplish, one, it doesn't become rooted and a real thing in our hearts, in our minds, and it requires the constant use of force and the constant use of resources put toward force rather than put toward the solving of problems, right? It's a huge misdirection of energetic output in order to just get people to agree with you rather than finding better solutions. And that's where entrepreneurs come in, and that's where people who are creating systems come in. You want to create the things that invite people in because it really touches at what they are, and we know what they are is people who want to help, and people who want to see people thriving. So we have to trust that a little bit more and not just default to force, which is what I think a lot of people on the left, I mean people generally, but people who really identify with that.
Yeah, well, I think that the political spectrum has switched now. Like stand behind the kind of politics of the anti-globalization movement in the late '90s, and I was a participant in a lot of those demonstrations, and in terms of opposing these trade deals that global institutions are using to exploit the third world, for instance, and against the invasion of Iraq. Like I still feel that I was on the side of justice and righteousness at that time, but now the left has gone into this totalitarianism in the name of safety kind of thing, and also an obsession with race and gender. And I'd like to get your perspective on that if I could.
Yeah, that's really problematic. That's the problem with rightness, with thinking that you are so right that it justifies any action you will take, and not understanding the spectrum of human existence, and that we all have to discover our own truths, and we have to be really solid in our own selves and our core to allow other people to exist in different states. And if you're not doing that, you got to take a hard look at what's missing in your own life. But yeah, I think there's a lot of shaming happening. I think there's a lot of moves to create separation rather than collaboration. And maybe it's not intentional if we're talking about the race issue. Well, I think this is an important point to make. We're all creating our reality and the story of our reality. And I have a son, he's 17 years old. I have many children, but my son in particular, there's this narrative out in the world that it says, the world is against you. It's holding you down. That that's not the world. No matter how true you think that is,
It's not a good attitude to have towards life.
It's not a good attitude to, and it's not true. Like, the thing is, it's not true. It may be true in certain contexts and circumstances, but he is the creator of his own world. He can move into the context and circumstances where that isn't true.
Yeah.
Right? And so just don't tell him that that there's this whole world against him, because it's hard enough in this world to overcome our insecurities and our, those things that stop us from really manifesting.
Beliefs manifest as reality, no?
Yes, if you expect to see something, you're going to see it. That's the way of it. And I just don't want him walking through the world expecting to see that in every interaction, because it's very disempowering. I want him to have an empowering narrative of the world.
So you live in Texas, which has been more spared from this COVID nonsense than most places.
Yes, go Texas.
Yeah, and so, like, what are things like there? Because I don't know, you have like heavy kind of Republican sort of attitudes, and like, I guess Austin is like a hotbed of artistic freakery and all that. That's where you're at, right?
Yeah, that's where I am.
So tell us what it's like. What's Austin like these days?
Austin is a beautiful vortex of the most wonderful, conscious human beings coming into connection with each other and trying to figure things out. It's a transplant city anyway, so it's like the type of personalities and people who move, who get up and move and take action and end up in a new place. And so there's an openness in that city. And people just really seem to be meeting you in a general sense. And also, I'm speaking through my own lens and the type of people that I attract. More generally, it just feels, and it's freer. We haven't gone through, we've gone through COVID and that whole narrative. Here's what I love about Austin right now. There are definitely people who are very concerned about COVID, and it affects their behavior in terms of, wearing masks and distancing and isolating in some ways. And then there are people who are living like this narrative doesn't exist. And what I really love about Austin is that I see them existing together, not separating, not entirely. Like, there are so many places where friends are together and they have different narratives about the world, but that isn't making them separate and hate each other. They're allowing for people,
That sounds amazing.
It's amazing.
So are you say that Austin is the most happeningest place in the U.S. right now?
I have no idea.
Quite possibly.
I don't know what's going on in the rest of the U.S.
Yeah.
I don't even want to project.
Okay.
I want to project that the rest of the world is coming into alignment and realization that we don't have to live in fear of anything.
Okay, perfect. This has been awesome. I want to give you the chance to tell the world about the Solarpunk Festival, why they should come, why it's awesome, and anything that you want to promote or.
Yes, absolutely. Solarpunk Summit is my vision for the future. It's a regenerative culture, technology, and consciousness hybrid festival conference. My vision for it is that it will help seed the new world. What does that mean? I want people to come into our little container and learn some of the skills that are necessary to actually build new communities. We all know a shift is happening. We all know that some of the old systems are crumbling. And what that can cause is fear, and that's where we lose control, and that's where there's violence. But when people feel empowered and they feel like they have community and they can shift into new systems that keep them safe, then we can avoid all of the chaos that comes from that. And so Solarpunk Summit is the container where you can learn those skills and meet the community and actually do so from a place of radically optimistically envisioning what the future can be like. We're not getting ready for a catastrophe. We're thinking about how we really want to live. We're taking this opportunity to envision a new and better world where nature and technology are balanced in very conscious individuals. that's the place where we are, no matter what anyone else is telling you. You have an opportunity right now to remake your world. And that's what we're doing at Solarpunk Summit. You are invited.
Yes, thank you very much for the invitation, and thank you very much for taking the time to sit down with me and share your views. And I wish you all the very best with this year's Solar Punk Summit.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much. June 2nd through the 5th, Austin, Texas. SolarPunkSummit.com.